Hey, how are you?
Jay, how are you, pal?
Jay.
Good to see you, buddy. How are you?
I'm very good. Very good. Say hi to Tim Stapleton, Jay.
Hi there. Hi there,
Jay,
Tim.
what's up?
Nice to
Thanks for
meet.
coming on.
Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
too.
Thanks for having me.
Jay, Tim played a little bit for the Maple Leafs, which, I have to mention that because, like, the fucking Maple Leafs.
Because I'm gonna mention it if he doesn't. So don't worry, you'll know.
Amazing. Well, lovely to meet you.
Let's get back to your living room when you're a kid and the Habs are on. What is that like? Is it total chaos? Is it like passion? The love of the organization, Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
It really comes through, obviously, in your book. And I read your book. And just what is that like for, I guess, for the people? Give them a little window into that living room, if you could.
Yeah. So it is like, it's like, whenever someone's like, how long have, when do you remember the first time or any of that shit that you watched the Habs or something like that? I say, do you remember the first time that you saw sunlight? Like it's just ever present in my life was typically my dad, often my dad and my mom in front of the TV watching the guys in red beating the bad guys, and I like, so what that typically was like, my dad would, he liked the commentary on the radio better than it was on TV. So he would find it on TV and then he would turn on our like hi-fi thing that he built and put together, that one of those great old school, like late 70s, early 80s ones with every beautiful knob. And he would put on the radio to match the screen on TV. And then he would just curse a blue streak through 3 periods of hockey every single game without fail. Like I there's a reason I put in my book that like that Christmas Eve that he fucked up of ours where like, my mom has my sister and I in the other room reading, the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas and the Gift of the Magi to us. And my dad's watching the Habs in their bedroom and yeah, it was like in a crazy weird bit of like comic timing in a music that was entirely like as if God had a sense of humor. My mom would read a line and then my dad would swear at the game and it timed out fucking perfectly where she would go, "'Twas the night before Christmas," and all through the house, "God damn it! Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. You fucking lazy fuck! Shit! Blow the fucking whistle. Skate, you fucking prick, whatever." And I just did, when that's all your dad ever says, it doesn't strike you as noticeable or a thing that you'd even mention. It's just like the same as like the plumbing going on or whatever, or, it's just one of those sounds that's always, but then, you have your friends over and you have your friends do double takes, or my mother just constantly mortified and my dad screaming at the top of his fucking lungs. And, so it was just like, it was always around. My dad painted all my shit bleu, blanc, rouge. I we moved to Ontario for 5 years. Like, and not just Ontario, like we moved to the fucking heart of the GTA. We moved to the like Oshawa is Leafs fan central, man. And like they grow on trees there. And my parents sent me to school every day in winter in a Habs jacket and wearing a Habs toque and shit. And like I got shit on mercilessly every year until a certain 1993. It was just like, it was just one of these things where I there was never a time where the Habs weren't the thing in my house, and there was never a time when they weren't the greatest sports team in the history of the world. And now, I've said it so much now that I've turned it into my own cliche, but I honestly don't know how else to describe it other than a kind of like religious thing. Like how do you describe what Catholicism is to your family, or in my case, like what the church is to my mom's family, what Judaism is to my dad's. Like it started long before I was born. It will continue long after I'm gone. It is the thing that united my family. It's how we identified ourselves. It was like, our traditions, everything, blah, 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 right? And so it's just like, Now, with my own personal issues with my dad and having to kind of find an identity of my own, I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater for some years. You know, there was years where I could have just as easily been watching the Habs without anything to do with my dad. I could have enjoyed it with my friends and I just didn't, because I had decided, you know, years prior, hockey's dad's thing, movies are my thing, never the twain shall meet. You know, and then of course I go on and I make a bunch of movies about hockey, which is like, it's not an accident.
I just think about how many times people have probably yelled at the screen and they were yelling at me. Like, you know, like they're like wishing, you know, like I missed a wide open net and it fucked the over under, like whatever, you know, because I've been a fan before. But what's your take on the Habs today?
Oh God. Well, like it's such a crazy, insane league, crazy, insane past few years, where I like was at Game 4 at the fucking Bell Center last summer with my wife. I watched the Habs play in the Stanley Cup, which is like crazy. You know, A, not a thing I ever necessarily thought I'd live to see. B, to let me tell you, to have been there in person and then to watch the first half, you know, the Ducharme half of this year, good Jesus, like what a, like, hard to reconcile. Like, obviously a whole bunch of reasons, we all know the reasons, but just to like, yeah, bloody unpleasant and not fun. God, they're fun as hell now though. What a wonderful. It's not just the vibe and the energy. It's also the type of hockey they play, man. You know, because winning is the thing, but also it's not warfare. It's still a sport, and so you should win in a way that is like a fucking fun way to watch, right? Like there are coaches that I don't need to throw under the bus who have coached our team that have records that you cannot dispute. Those are coaching records that anybody would hire, right? Like wins to losses, absolutely no unquestionable black and white. And yet 82 games feel like 178, right? Like because of the, you know, in neutral zone, dump and
little
chase,
trap.
whatever.
Maybe a little trap here and there.
Yeah, you know, and it's just like, who the fuck wants to sit through that, man? It just is like, you know, the season's too freaking long anyway, right? And so we play fun, exciting hockey. The boys all look psyched to be there, and the like, we don't have a true sample size of what this organization looks like, what their decision making is like. Like, we don't know the summer or whatever you call, you know, we will, whatever the postseason to come is going to be when we kind of really know what this head office looks like, what they give a shit about the Habs they're trying to create. But so far, it's been incredibly encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, the Habs, and to Tim's question, and you know what I think is...
I scored against the Habs, by the way. Sorry, guys.
Good. I'm glad you did, Tim.
I know you guys would have never known that, but yeah. I just had to tell you.
Good on you. I haven't. That's fucking cool.
Yeah, no.
There you go.
Hey, fuck. This is why I'm on here, so people know I played.
The Habs and just what's going on there. What I find fucking hilarious, Jay, is they had to bring a guy in from Boston to square this fucking mess away. How's that? Jeff Gorton, a guy from Boston coming up here. When you talk about rivalry and talk about fucking hate each other, and you bring a guy from Boston in to square it away. And no disrespect here to Ken Hughes. Yeah, he's a Montreal guy, but transplanted down to Beantown. Yeah. I think they got it going on. I think they're going to turn this thing around and get it going. Already got it going in the right direction. And you're right about the team. This team quit on the previous coach. We saw it. Guys bailed.
Yeah. That's what it looked like.
Do you think that, and again, when I first came here, let me put it this way. When I first came in 79, the first referendum, okay, I did not have a clue about Montreal and the politics and all that.
Yeah.
And I was so naive. I could not understand for the life of me, because growing up in Boston, they've got a terrible history of racism, and everything to me was black and white. And I got here, and I'm there. Why can't all these white people get along? I mean, come on. I just didn't get it. I was young. I was naive. Now that I have kind of grasped that, I still, for the life of me, why do we have to, here in Montreal, have a French coach and French general manager? Do you buy into that?
I do, and I can explain it for me.
Right.
Like I can explain, and I do, and I argue this with tons of friends of mine. This is obviously a big hot button issue and has been in our city my whole life. So, but for me, it's like this. It's like, if you accept that the Habs are more than a hockey team, if it and I think that they occupy a sort of amount of cultural real estate and political real estate within Canada and within Montreal specifically and in Quebec that like no other team does where they are based in, certainly not in hockey. Okay. Now this is not to say, when I say this, people hear, oh, the Oilers aren't a real dynasty. Oh, the Islanders aren't a real dynasty, or whatever. That's not the point. Well, I'll take the Oilers as a great example. Okay. There is no sort of, there is no political revolution or movement that the Oilers are the emblem of. There is no kind of profound paradigm shift in a culture that the Oilers sort of help trigger or are responsible for in some way. The Oilers are not the emblem of some sort of like a pretty huge minority group. Okay, the Oilers are a great hockey team with great hockey fans in a city. I've never been to Edmonton. I can't speak to how great it is. Let's just say, for the sake of my argument, it's great. Okay, lots of great players to put that sweater on. All of this shit. Okay, but none of that means what the Habs mean to Montreal and to Quebec. Right? And this is just a history thing, right? Like in every sport, there are some teams that mean a bit more to where they're from than other teams in the league. Now, I envy teams that mean half as much, because all they need to worry about is fucking winning, right? All they need, or getting championships, right? And the Habs have to worry about a whole bunch of other stuff. As well they should, though, because that's what makes it so special. That's why we're allowed 20 minutes of fucking movies and old sepia silent footage before every game. This is why our rafters are decked the way they are. This is why when the Habs win one game in the Cup last year, the city goes, the riot cops are out, right? Like, you wouldn't have it any other way. Okay, nobody else does this. Like, when we lose, the town is silent. You can hear a friggin' pin drop, okay? When Vancouver loses, the spoiled brats, that's when they fucking have a riot, okay? We riot when we win, right? There is... So, I would have put the Habs in league with... In soccer, you have Barcelona in Spain. You have Celtic, Glasgow Celtic up in Scotland. There are certain teams that end up representing... a sort of minority cultural group and a very important political movement that you don't want to go back from. Like, we are, like, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, French people in Quebec, even though they were the majority there, they didn't own factories, and they worked at the factories, but all the owners were Anglo. Okay, like, life was harder for them once upon a time, The Habs are connected to and representative of French Canada's ability to assert itself. Now, I'm from the English side of the city, right?
Got you.
I would grow up as a Maroons fan if the Maroons had still existed, okay? Like, because the Habs were the French team in the war, right? Like, until the Maroons had disappeared, right? I've got a Maple Leaf, okay? I'm not a separatist. I don't believe Quebec should be its own country. However, I respect those who do, and I'm no fool. I grew up there. I can acknowledge that they have a distinct society, and the Habs are an important part of that. So therefore, at the very least, the guy that's running the show should be able to speak in French.
So it's not as simple as some people think. It's as simple as the coach has to be French because he has to converse every day with the fan base through the media, the French media. It's really not to speak to the players or anybody because there's not many French players left.
No, and as anybody that has spent time in the confines of the Bell Center or in Brossard, you hear a lot of English in that hallway, and in the locker room, it's mostly English kids. So it's not necessarily about the day-to-day running of the team so much as it is about and it doesn't have to be. This is another thing. People also get sort of confuse or conflate this. They think that the ability to speak French is the same as being a French or Francophone person.
A good Chinook.
No. And it's got to be, I think it just has to be somebody that's trying to speak French and looks like they give a shit about it, man. And ideally, it's somebody from here that has a perfect command of it, but maybe it's somebody who's like look at Gainey, right? Look at this city still loves Gainey. The city still loves Gainey. And that is not just because of his career. That's also because of he sort of understood and showed respect to the organization that he's, representative of.
Pas français.
Oui, il faut.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, don't, Tim. Oh, wait, Carlis, Tim.
It's fine. Go ahead.
Parlez avec, Carlis. Oh, wait, don't.
I can't tell you how crazy it is, by the way, as a TO. I can't tell you how crazy it is that Chris can sing the national anthem in French, knows that shit. That he speaks better French as a fucking kid from Boston than anybody here in Toronto speaks. It's crazy.
Awesome to have you on today. Obviously, a huge Habs fan, writer, director, stand-up comedy. You do it all. I want to go back, I guess, if we can, to the beginning with you. And when we talk about how did a young Jay Baruchel get interested in acting and comedy?
All right, cool. Good question. So I think it starts with me just always having a real big mouth. Like I just always had too much energy, and my mom's family, she's like 6 of 8 kids, 6 of 8 Irish Catholic stereotypes. And so whenever we'd have kind of Christmas gatherings and such, I was always kind of, I don't know, I was the baby at Christmas. And so I would get up on the coffee table and do impressions for people and stuff when I was a little kid. And so it's just kind of always one of those things. And at 8 or 9, I said to my folks, I think I want to be a director. I want to make movies when I grow up. And, so that was always a kind of a goal. That was always a thing that even predates the acting. And then we sort of flash forward to us being in Montreal, and it's 94, 95. And my dad sees a brochure for a kid's acting class, a once a week thing. So they signed me up for that. And there I kind of got discovered. I shouldn't say discovered. There I was just had the chance to audition for a student film that some Concordia film students were making. Got the job, and on that gig, I met some professional actors who sort of recommended me to their agent. It's a really boring story, but it starts when I was 12, and it stems from my dad being he doesn't want to go play hockey. He hated playing softball. Well, maybe he likes to be in a church basement doing this kind of stuff,
I want to go back and talk about mom and dad and where they met. And I found this a howl because I was probably in 1234 when they met, and they met at a disco in Montreal back in the days when Knuckles was playing here. And when I read that in the book, I'm like, God, I might have been in there that night. But Mom and Dad meet at the disco. It's pretty cool story. But Dad loved the game of hockey, and he meets Mom, ends up having 2 children. Your relationship with your dad, I think it's something I want to jump into, because it certainly seems like, in all father-son relationships, I believe, are complicated. But when you look at Dad and his love of hockey and his maybe desire to steer you that way, what kept you from going that way?
It was a simple equation for me. I have always been, and as I approach 40, I'll be 40 in a few weeks, I'm exactly the same way in this respect, which is, if I feel that something is kind of worth doing, if I get enough out of it personally, I will do whatever I have to do a thing, right? So the absolute, sheer joy I get from making movies, especially writing and directing them, there is no amount of like torture I wouldn't go through to do it. And I have to, because they're very hard things to do. It's very hard to make a movie. So it is a lot of trials and tribulations to get there. So when it came to anything kind of sports when I was a kid, so I played 2 years of softball and I skated with all the other kids and shit too. I just like the rare time that like I connected with the ball and hit the sweet spot, or could do laps around the rink without eating it, I was like, who gives a shit? Like, it just wasn't enough for me. It didn't do a thing for me. I didn't get the kind of endorphin release I think you need to get out of it to keep doing it. What I did get that from is what I think what a lot of kids wouldn't be caught dead doing would think was miserable, which was I was at home typing. Right? Like, and I loved coming up with stories in my head. I wanted nothing more than to like be in my room surrounded by my toys and comic books and shit. And I would create these whole universes in my head with heroes and villains and all these epic sagas. Right? Like, and there's no game of pickup down the street that can compare with that for me. So it was just a simple thing where it was like I didn't get enough out of it to enjoy doing it. And my father, to his credit, because I think like most kids like me with a dad like that, that would kind of be it. And we'd be on sort of 2 separate courses, and my father, to his credit, just wanted me to have a thing. He would have loved for it to be his thing, but when it wasn't his thing, he saw that I had a thing. And so then he just encouraged that like crazy. And so I get my love of movies from my dad as well.
Was, if you don't mind me asking, was Serge, was he a hero or was he a villain?
That's a great question. I think like most people, he's probably either somewhere in the middle or both at different times. There's a lot that was likable in my dad that I sort of have taken and extracted and I'm proud that it's in me. But there was a lot that was loathsome as well for me. And so he was selfish above all, but at the same time, he was terribly proud, terribly loyal, and had a very clear kind of line that you don't fucking cross. And so what that gave me, especially when I started working down in the States and in California and stuff, was like, it's a freelance gig, so they'll hold you to the standard you allow yourself to be held to, right? And when you have my dad for a father, who's like, there's just some shit he won't suffer. Like I'm only getting fucked with up to a point, right? Like, and I would always be willing to play chicken and walk away from shit just cause like, that's the way that I was raised. And I think that like, when you don't need them more than they need you, you can kind of, now some of this is shooting myself in the foot and silly, like, you know, all I have is my balls shit, right? But I don't know that I would have survived being down there. Like, I don't think I could have, you know, because to do what I've had to do is like not difficult, just like daunting, especially for someone who has like social anxiety like I do. You know, to have to constantly engage with hundreds of people a day, or have cameras pointed at me, or answer questions, or go on talk shows when I know millions of people are watching. You know, like I literally, like, I have really real bad anxiety disorder. This is shit that would, like, if I wasn't an actor, there's no way I would be the biggest introvert. You'd never hear from me, you know? And so I don't think I could do what I had to do to be able to do this if it wasn't for my dad. But he's also, like you said, hero or villain. He's also, he was villain plenty of times too. He's he's a mean bastard. But God, he, I'll say this, when he was in the house, when I was growing up around him, I was never scared. Fear was never a sensation I really experienced until my folks split up, you know? And because there was like, there was no one my dad couldn't take. And so there was nobody that was ever coming to harm us. And so, like, you know, so that's something too. So yeah, so he's somewhere in the middle, I think.
I love this, Jay, by the way. I just think all of it is, you know, I could easily be the guy on the other side that just sees you in the movies, right? I love some of the roles you play. But to myself, it's like I can, you know, there was a lot of failure to get, you know, where I did with hockey. And clearly, you know, it is an up and down road. But this is why I'm excited to do this, and this is new to me. So I appreciate this because I want to hear, you know, the journey, because I think that's really important. The anxiety thing, man, I'm excited. I'm like, I don't even want to release this podcast.
Yeah.
You know, like,
I hear
that's
that.
how I think, right? Like, it's just like, I don't want to,
No, I hear
you know,
that.
I just don't want to, you know, hear what people think. But
No,
this is great. This is great. I love it.
Oh, I appreciate you letting me chat. I think, you know, I think it's easy to see all to go and look at the stats or someone's credits or their CV and sort of reduce their whole career down to quantifiable stuff like that. But there's a whole bunch of mess on the way and in between, right?
No, for sure. If someone asks me, like, hey, like, or someone says, like, oh, I could have played, I blew my knee out in '85 at the YMCA, like, I'm like, what? Like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, wait, what? Like, I feel, I hold it internally, but it's just, I gotta accept that, you know, people don't understand, I guess.
No.
Yeah, I hear you.
I got to tell you, when you just said that about the anxiety, Jay, and social anxiety, and I it's hard for me to comprehend that. Like, I've never suffered from depression, okay? And I hear people that are depressed talk about it, and I can certainly sympathize, but I can't empathize. Now, this year, I was on prednisone for something, and when I came off it, I had 4 days. I went into a deep depression. I came down too fast off of it. And I got to tell you, I'm glad it happened, because now I know. The social anxiety part of it, when you say you have that, and the ballsier to be able to do what you do, suffering with that social anxiety, it's hard for me to get that part. How did you break through to be able to do what you do, suffering from that?
I'll be honest. For a long time, it was literally just sucking it up. The stakes were higher for me than they necessarily needed to be, which was, and I made the stakes high. But also, like, when my parents split, you know, my dad took quite a nosedive, and so before I was 18 was kind of forced into, I became I had to look after my family, right? And so when I was like trying to get, you know, when I go down to LA and try to get a gig, it wasn't just I need this job for me and for my career, and, you know, if I didn't get a gig, I couldn't just call it a day. If I didn't get a gig, that means like, yeah, I just there's rent to be paid and people's tuition to be paid and food to be bought and so when like if it was just me, I don't know that I would have cared half as much. It was my my family, so I didn't want to let them down, and so for years I would just like. Yeah, I just accepted that it was normal to be nauseous all the time. I accepted that it was normal to just either be like, yeah, I would either be nauseous, I'd sort of like psych myself up to the point where I'm just like sailing on adrenaline, and then I would be exhausted and dead. And like and so I knew only 3 kind of sensations, and that can't last, by the way, and it doesn't last. And like what that sort of metastasized into was years of like waking up every single day with butterflies in my stomach, like waking up with a start like every fucking day, man, and just being at odds and dreading what I had to do that day, and knowing that I've got to sort of meet people that I'm not comfortable with or I don't know. So I can't be myself, and I certainly can't let them know that I'm like scared shitless, and I've got to be able to do this, and I got to be able to like be likable and memorable, and then I've also got to be able to do the gig that that I want to do, and I've got to so all this shit, right? And I started getting real bad panic attacks. I just like it just started happening. First it was one every couple of days, then it was a few a week. Then it was like a few a day, and then it got to a point where like I had like half a dozen of these fucking things throughout the day, where I would just like my hands would shake. I'd get sort of super dizzy. My heart would race. I'd feel like I was about to puke or pass out or some goddamn thing. And I also, the weirdest one, all of those things are just physical though. They don't fuck with me as much as what was happening when that would happen. When I get into a panic attack, I would go through what's called disassociation or whatever, where you don't feel like you're in real life anymore. It's hard to describe, but it feels like you kind of fade. Everyone else around you in the world continues, but you're just like a ghost on the outside. I try to say it's like if life is a movie, it turns into like photographs, and I'm aware of it, and I worry that the second someone notices I'm freaking out, they're going to freak out, which will make me freak out more. And I just started like awful cycle that I was too embarrassed to tell anybody about too. So I was just like dealing with it and trying to figure out my own little tricks to get through it. So I would just like I would splash cold water. I'd slap myself in the face. I would do the alphabet backwards, and I would say all my vital info. And that would typically kind of bring me down. And then it stopped working. And I remember the kind of like straw that broke the camel's back in terms of like having to go get some kind of help with it was I was like auditioning for a director that I really wanted to work for in a movie I really wanted to do. And so these were like the personal kind of creative stakes I placed on myself. Like this one wasn't going to feed my, send my sister to school or anything or whatever, but it was definitely going to be something I wanted to do. And I get there, and the director is like, finds out I'm from Montreal, has all these nice things to say, blah, blah, blah. We start bonding. And then I feel this thing, fucking like bile coming up in my heart and my throat. I said, can I go to the washroom? Let me just go to the washroom 1 second. I run off to the washroom, and I do all the things I just told you. And I come back, and I physically couldn't grab the door handle, the doorknob to get back into the room. I couldn't do it, and I had to like grab one hand and force it onto the other, and I just come in white as a ghost, and they can tell, and then I just do the worst audition I've ever done, because I'm just trying to get the fucking thing over with. And I come out, and my friend sees me, he's like, did you get into a fight? Like, what the fuck happened? Like, you were all, like, I was just all mangled, right? And I was like, yeah, ready to quit. And it was, my manager, to his credit, that's like, look, you want to quit, you quit. No one will be more supportive than me. I just want you to quit for the right reason. So he's like, so talk to a shrink And if after talking to a shrink you still want to quit, then that's that. But talk to a shrink and see that you're sure you want to quit, or if there's just something you need to kind of get off your chest and figure out, And mercifully, it was that. So the other thing, but yeah, it still just requires me to white knuckle it. Every time I do a talk show, every time I do a red carpet, every time I do anything where there's like a bunch of people that I don't know around, it beats the piss out of me still.
Yeah, it's fucking exhausting.
Yeah.
Like you said the word, because when it comes to that, I have, it's like that. I hate people and I deal with anxiety. Like I want to be alone, but I don't want to be by myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like this whole sociopath kind of, and then what you're saying too is and Nux, you being, the eldest of us, I'm 39 too. It's kind of like we couldn't really talk about it for, I had an Irish Catholic dad, right? Like we couldn't talk about it. It never goes away. You still deal with it. You probably deal with it in a way of today with like more discipline and you just handle it differently. But it probably that breakthrough moment was when you probably were able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm guessing, but like it's you gave an unreal description of kind of something, I have a similar kind of thing. I wouldn't say the panic attacks to the end there were, but just that anxiety, like driving to the rink and to practice, not really wanting to go because the first initial thing that would happen with me is I'd walk in the locker room and feel like I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I don't whether it's a self-acceptance issue or what, but it's crazy that you're doing what you're doing and these are the things that you have to go through.
Thank you. And there's a name for that, for going there and thinking you're not meant to be there, especially when you are, is called imposter syndrome, right? Like anybody with a kind of good, half decent moral compass, when they get some kind of success, feel a sort of like, oh, they got the wrong guy, or they missed this. If they knew who I really was, they wouldn't want to work with me or whatever, right? But I'll tell you who never has fucking imposter syndrome, like serial killers and sociopaths and all these fucking pricks. Like those guys never question a goddamn thing. They think they're God's gift to the world, right? And it's like feeling like you're undeserved is this sort of like a hallmark, I think, of having a decent sort of morality to you, and or if you ever went to Catholic school.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I did. I went to Catholic school, and certainly when you look at family of origin stuff, and when I do, I look back at my relationship with my dad, and there were times, God, I felt, I always tried to please him. I always try to do something good for him so he would give me the pat in the back, right? And there were times I felt like I let him down. Did you feel that way with your dad at all?
So
he let you down.
I would say with my dad it was the second thing.
Yeah.
With my mom, however, I am still to this day it is the worst like thing, like I if I ever did okay in school, it was out of fear of letting mom down, right? Like that is just like I never, I'm a mama's boy, and so I never wanted to let her down, and so that was something I had to kind of get past in my own way. Was like, I think like, look, I want my mom to be proud of me. I want my wife to be proud of me. I want everybody to be proud of me. But I honestly, like, I think part of the thing, hopefully, the work towards that I constantly doing is just like, at the end of the day, I gotta be psyched. That's kind of, like I want to be a good person and I want to be important in everybody's life. But in terms of like material things or like success in a thing I've chosen to take on, like, did the job I want to do, did I do it well? And do I, I try to make it so that all that matters is that I'm proud of it myself. But still to this day, I will like stand in front of my wife or my, and I'll be like, yeah, did you like it though? Just tell me you like it. Tell me you thought the thing was funny or whatever,
Well,
yeah, you want to be honest, right? Like it's kind of like, I don't know, it's exhausting to make sure everyone thinks you're okay when you're not, right?
Yeah,
like that's what I do. I fucking just, I'm doing great when I know inside I'm like, fuck, but yeah, I get it, man.
Your mom again, I love what your mom said to you as a young boy. She said, try and look for a job you would do for free and get paid for it. It seems like you've done that. Now,
Yes.
you also are quoted as saying that you like writing strong women because as a straight male, there's nothing more attractive to me than a strong girl. Now, obviously, your mom, the backbone and her wherewithal to, at one point, put all that other stuff aside when it was just Serge and Mom. But now Jay and Taylor come along. Your mom really took that mantle of mother and father, in a sense, did she not?
Oh, did she ever? Yeah, absolutely. My sister and I are very, very fortunate to have been raised by who we were raised by. She's just sort of like, yeah, she's just hard as fuck, man, and she just never suffered fools. And so now this can mean sometimes that she could be sort of too exacting or have a, very, very high standards that inevitably you're going to not, you will fail to meet at some point. But it was all because, so she was raised by good parents. And my grandparents, I was very, very lucky to have them in my life down the street from me every day for like 5 years when I was a kid. And that was the best thing ever because my granddad was my granddad was a war hero but who was also at the same time a very, very, very mild, quiet, soft-spoken, gentle man. And, I would ask him questions on the, when he was just taking a nap on the couch, like, Granddad, what did you do when you ran out of bullets? And he'd say, oh, use whatever we could, scissors. And I immediately was like, oh, you killed a German with a pair of scissors once, like what the, and then, but it was a hard thing to reconcile with the guy that never raised his voice to anybody, and so my mother, I don't know, she was just like, she always made sure we were fed, always made sure we were, clean and educated, and always like said, just because is what my grandmother's sort of saying. Just because you're working class doesn't mean you have no class, right? And so it was just a sort of like it all came from a sense of self-respect and knowing that we kind of like no one's going to give us anything either. That if any good is going to come or anything, whatever you want in the world, you have to get it somehow. You can't expect it. I remember being a kid and asking my mother, seeing all these like American movies, I was like, hey, so when I graduate high school, will you and Dad, send me to university? And she laughed and she said, no, of course not. She said, if you decide you want to go to university, I will support you. I will tell you what job you should get to make a bunch of money. I'll tell you how to save it so you can pay for it. But no, I'm not paying for anything. At that point, you're a grown-up, and if you want to go to school, to be because you want to and you work for it. I said, okay. But when I'm 16 and I get my driver's license, all the kids in the movies, their parents buy them a first car. And she said, no, once again, if you decide you want to drive, you'll get a license, you'll get a job to pay for a car. I'll tell you which car to get. I'll help you figure out the down payments, but that's all you. And so I just like, I don't know. And I'm not going to be one of these people that shits on young people now and says nobody wants to work. How the fuck do I know? I'm sure that everybody wants to work as much as they used to, and I'm sure there's just as many lazy people as there used to be. I'm sure the metric is exactly the fucking same. All I know is for me, anything that was going to come because I wanted it to come. And I was lucky that like I took nothing for granted, but also I was always told my whole fucking life, that you are what's going to get you there. There's nothing you can't do. Like if you want to make movies for a living, you will make movies. If you want to, climb Everest, you will climb Everest. Like you have infinite potential, and I believe you should do it, whatever the fuck you want to do. But any success is 100% on you. Right. And so I'm very, very, very lucky because when I go into adulthood, life never runs out of ways to kick the fuck out of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so like, I'm glad that like I was raised with, if nothing else, a thick skin and a sort of sense of pride in myself.
You know, a lot of people, it's on you, success, and you can be anything you want. I'm a, true believer of that. A lot of people say like, oh, I was good at this, but I had to make money, I had to work. They have all these excuses. Like, people want to buy the dream house, but not want to have to fix it, right? Like, they don't want to, right? Like, they want to see, like, they could do something, but they see ahead of time how much work that's going to be. And it's just like, oh, you just really didn't want to do it. That's all you had to say.
Well, and also always from the outside looking in, you never see. It's really hard to see the shitty, tedious, everyday bit of it, right? Like, I think a lot of people love to say, oh, I'm gonna write something, or I'm blah blah blah, and it's just like, okay, but that does mean sitting down and doing it every friggin' day, and not being just psyched that you have an idea. Is this idea good enough? And all of these different things, like there's, and then if you're able to finish the fucking thing, then you've got to hope somebody else thinks it's worth doing and worth making and worth funding, and that can be God knows how long, right? Like it is, yeah. It's just, I think some gigs that are different than the normal, are very colorful and exciting, and of course people would want to, of course that seems like a thing that everybody would want to do. It also, just like anything else, it has its version of like, yeah, having to stock the freezer every fucking morning or whatever.
Yeah, so that family dynamic, and yeah, we talked about mom and dad, but your dad loving hockey and getting into hockey, your passion for the Montreal Canadiens, that team, and hockey
but
in
the
general.
Habs.
I look at Dennis Leary, who you worked with, is a huge Bruins fan.
Yes, he is.
I don't know if he's as much a hockey fan, though, as you are.
I think he beats me, Chris, to be honest. I think
No.
Hockey,
though?
Yes,
I know
hockey.
He's a Bruins fan.
No. Hockey,
Really?
hockey. This guy, no, he puts me to shame. I was floored by it. I was legitimately floored by it. There is not a single person playing hockey in the Western world right now that he doesn't know at least a piece about. Like all he reads. Here's where he beats me. I read mostly World War II and medieval history books. Like that's my stuff, okay? So that's what I'm interested in.
I'm with you.
So Dennis reads as much, if not more, than I do. He's a really voracious reader. He's a a dozen, 24 books a year guy. He reads constantly, but all he reads is about hockey. There isn't a hockey book or essay published that he hasn't read. We start talking about the Summit series, and we start talking about 72, and he's like, well, have you read this one? And he lists this title. I was like, no. He's like, well, so it was published by a university in Manitoba. Not a lot of people have read it, but to me, he goes, it's a bit academic. You have to prepare yourself. It's a dry academic paper. But in terms of history of 72, Summit series, there's not a better thing written. Like, how the fuck, like, I don't know this shit. And I live up here, and he does it. Like, so he is a legitimate academic student historian of the game in a really, really special, earnest way. And it's something like I'm very lucky. Like, when I did that show with him and Jerry D, the three of us, because Jerry knows his hockey too, and Jerry's very good at hockey. And so, like, pretty much all of last year's playoffs, every single day was this just stupid three-way text between the three of us. Like, we all chirp each other. Because Jerry's Leafs and I'm Habs, and obviously Leary's Bruins, but yeah, I am definitely like, if the Habs or Canada aren't playing, I will often not watch. If a hockey game is on in front of Dennis, whoever the fuck it is, he'll watch it.
That's amazing. I always just looked at him as a Bruins fan because he loved Cam Neely and he was close with Neely, and so yeah, that is funny.
He's a big fan of yours specifically.
Speaking of Chris and his role in the game. Obviously, I know, your ties to the movie Goon, in the role of fighting. For me, I can't judge. I know the fighting's been weeded out a little bit, but I understand the respect of it. I wasn't a fighter. I didn't have to fight. I was asking guys.
You weren't a fighter, Tim?
No. I was asking guys what they were doing after the game and shit. But no, I understand in respect, obviously, that role, just because I was fortunate to play. I played with guys that were the toughest guys in the league. Didn't even know there was a puck out there. They might play like 30 seconds. But it gave guys like I could, like, when they were in the lineup, I could fucking skate in a Speedo if I wanted to. Like, no one, you know what I mean? Like, and so, with all that being said, it's like, what's your take today on how that has gone with fighting?
So it starts with, number one, I got to answer as, like, any answer I'll give is as a fan, right? So it's ultimately none of my business because I don't have to do it. And so I have to give it this important little asterisk, grain of salt caveat that whatever I'm saying is the same as if I chime in on another country's politics or a war that's going on. I'm not going to, I risk nothing, so it's none of my fucking business. So, but that being said, I adored hockey fighting. I was raised in a house that loved it. My dad, that's the role he played on every hockey team he played on, right? And so, like, Nyland, no joke, was like one of the favorite players. Like, in my household when I was a kid, this was one of the heroes. This is one of the honest to God legends and lions in my house you don't hear every name on every team constantly. You don't hear every name on your team constantly, but you hear who your parents love, right? So you hear a certain name a lot, and Chris's was one of those names that I heard every day of my life in my house. Okay. So I am, and I couldn't have made the two movies I made without sort of having an affinity for that role. All right. Now, however, if the boys decide, or doctors who know what they're looking at, and I didn't, you know how many days I went to med school? 0. You know how experienced I am with diagnosing concussion syndrome? Absolutely not. Right. So if experts are saying there's a thing and guys feel a thing happening to them, who the fuck am I to say, hey, keep doing this because I find it entertaining and my dad loved it? Like, it's none of my fucking business, right? Like, the world within where the people who have to do this will decide if it has to be done, right? And so, but I've also always believed that hockey that fighting in hockey was kind of more democratic than a lot of hockey outsiders would paint it as, right? Like, a lot of people would lump hockey fighting in with, like, headshots and cheap shots and boarding and all of these things that can really fuck a guy up, and the guy had no choice in the matter, right? A lot of hockey fights, pretty democratic. A lot of hockey fights, two guys are fighting, they've both chosen to fight, right? And so if they want, it's all about what the guys who are going to have to do it want to do, right? If they want to do it, they should do it. However, if they don't want to do it, they shouldn't do it. And if we know generationally that it does an unpleasant thing that people don't want to keep happening, who the fuck am I to say you got to keep doing this? So that's why the second Goon movie is all about, when your body and your head's all fucked up from doing this. Like, it would be irresponsible to have made a movie that was kind of a love letter to this thing without showing at least a tiny Hollywood version of the cost, some of the cost that it incurs, because this is not a job that you can do and skate away scot-free at the end, no matter what, right? And so I love watching it. I get excited when it happens. I still check Hockey Fights routinely as a website. But if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
And Chris, Chris, when I said, like, they didn't know there was a puck out there, I was not referring to you.
Oh, I know.
I know you had.
Come on.
I know you had 20-something goals.
The kid could dangle. I could dangle. You kidding me? Fucking scoring a fucking penalty shot at the Forum. There's no better feeling. People think winning a fight. Like, listen, I love to fight. I loved it. I love sticking up for guys. I love being there for guys. What I will say, though, there is no better feeling for a hockey player than to score a goal. For me, that was the ultimate for me. When I scored a goal, especially let's say an important goal or a goal, not a goal that makes it 5-1 and you broke someone's shutout. No, but an important goal is no better feeling. And then, when it's funny, and Jay, I go back to that movie, and this is the old quote from Herbert Spencer. There is a principle which is proof against all arguments, which is a bar against all information, and that principle is contempt prior to investigation. Right. Now, I had that contempt for this movie.
I know.
And
I know you did.
And not so much the movie itself, but
name. It was
the name
title.
Goon. Yeah.
I know.
And I remember I was asked on radio, and I said, I just don't go for that. It's a derogatory term, and I'll tell you where it came from. One of the things. When I looked at guys who fought and did that job, I knew them personally, and I could never allow myself or someone else to call them a goon. I hated that word. Now, that being said, for me, the worst incident ever was I was at the Hall of Fame, and I was going to the ceremony, and in the hotel, I see a guy I play with, Marcel Dion. And Marcel, the little fat man, I used to call him, because he is a little fat man. And the little fat man come up, hey, Mas, how you doing, buddy? How's it going? Everything. And his wife was there, and he says to his wife, oh, do you remember? He said, oh, yeah. She said, I remember. The Goon, Chris Nylund, the Goon. I was like, you fucking... It fucking pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I just turned the other, and I focused on Marcel, and I continued to talk to him. I basically ignored her, but that pissed me off. That's the contempt I have for the word. But in watching the movie afterwards, and certainly reading your book and understanding what you were doing there, I could appreciate it.
Oh,
and
good.
I do
That means a lot.
appreciate the movie. I really do.
That means a lot. I'm obviously I'm biased, but I'm very proud of both flicks. Obviously, the one I directed, the second one, I'm even especially more proud of. But what we were trying to do, man, with that, that word, we thought it could get stolen back, right? And it was all about the guys that you kind of dismiss with that word. But what does that person actually look like up close? And this shitty word that we've come up with to talk about the guy that is most representative of team spirit, the guy that chips her up, chips her down, whatever the score, will still fucking go out and play the shit of his life. Like, there is no truer, more honest kind of embodiment of what, if there is such a thing as team spirit, if that's not just some hokey bullshit, if it exists, it is represented purely in a hockey enforcer. And to call them a goon is such a shitty way to dismiss all of that. And so we kind of like, it was deliberate kind of using that name, because we were like, yeah, you think it's a goon? Come sit down and see what it actually looks like.
Fuck yeah, I love that. I think the best guys in the locker room were the goons.
Hey. Kick your ass.
No, they were the best guys.
Certainly in my experience, the guys with the least amount of ego and the easiest guys to hang out with of pro athletes would be hockey fighters. Like, I made 2 of these movies, and so I've gotten to know a lot of hockey players, gotten to work with some, and I can tell you, like, who's a guy that, like, I want to hang around with, and who's not a guy that I want to hang around with, and without fail, the fighters were always the nicest, most polite, most punctual, easiest guys to be around. So I take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, Chris, that's how I feel.
I have to agree.
I bet.
I have to agree.
I bet.
And I agree, because I know a lot of them, and really good people. There's a lot of good people.
Correct.
A lot of good people in the game. Just hockey players in general. When you look at all the major sports, in your book, when certainly, there's so many good things in here, and I never realized, I guess, the affinity, first of all, your dad had for me, and then
big time.
kind of that gets passed to you in a sense, and it kind of blew me away. And then here we are in the book, and I remember this night, just for last festival here in Montreal, Tim. Comedians come out, they do their gigs, and Jay was hosting one night, and Mr. Molson had me come and represent the Canadians and give Jay an honorary Canadians jersey with his name on it, and the C, and I come out and presented it to him on stage. And wouldn't you know, he got down on his fucking knees and was bowing to me like this. I'm like, hello, okay, get up, will you? But I was like, that's when it kind of hit me. And then when you wrote the book and you included that in the book, it blew me away how much that you really were a Habs fan. And in the book, actually, I wrote on the back cover, I wrote, "Born Into It is a raw look into the life of a true Habs fan. Jay's passion, love, and loyalty for the Habs is right up there with Jeff Molson's, the owner. I mean, he's been there since he's been a little snotty-nosed rich kid from Westmount. But it's a must-read for anyone who thinks they're a Habs fan.
That's very nice.
And Jay doesn't think he's a Habs fan. I don't think he is. I know he is.
Thank you.
And just when when you talk about it, the passion, and your dad, Serge, and your mom, everybody, the family, and I just think it's so cool. And living in Toronto now, out of Montreal, you're in TO, you have said that it's weakened your devotion to the Habs. How was that?
Oh, Jesus, did I say? Okay, so what I meant by that was just by virtue of the fact that I wasn't, I weakened it is a very relative thing. When it ruled my life as opposed to just a thing that rules my life slightly. That's horseshit, by the way. I was wrong when I said it. No, what I meant when I said that was I moved from a city where 3 times a week I knew what everybody I knew was doing at 7 or 7:30, right? Like, and everybody was watching hockey. And it was like how I kind of split up my week. Every newspaper was about the game from the night before. And so I moved to a city where that just wasn't the case. And so, yeah, I would like it sort of, I was like, oh, maybe I'll watch a movie tonight once in a while. But, you know, it's to truth be told, now that this is years on since I said that, it's kind of made it stronger in a lot of ways too, because it's like brought out this awful, it's increased, I should say, not brought out. It's increased the troll tendency that's in every Habs fan vis-a-vis the Toronto fan base. You know, Habs fans are so fucking petty, right? Like you would think having 24 Stanley Cups that we wouldn't need to be petty, right? But I tell me if you think this is horseshit. Habs winning is equaled, sometimes surpassed, by the Leafs losing. Like, Habs fans take just as much joy in a Leafs loss as they do in a Habs victory.
That's horseshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't think that's... I do. I certainly do. I know that when Centennial Plaza, when they started Centennial Plaza in front of the fucking Bell Center, I got 2 bricks out there, by the way. The first they turned down my first brick. They said, I wrote, you got to type in what you wanted the brick to say, and I did. And then they called me, and I was on set in the States, and they said, did we're calling about your brick in Centennial Plaza, and I'm like, oh yeah. And they said, did you really think we could put "fuck Toronto" on a brick? And I was like,
they wouldn't let you.
They wouldn't let me. And I said, well, you got to give me credit for trying. And they said, do you honestly think you were the only one? And I was like, wow, there you go. 100th anniversary of the Habs. Anybody can put anything they want on a brick, and a whole bunch of us wanted to put "fuck Toronto." So, yeah. I
can identify.
Yeah. So it weakened it to a degree, but it also forged it, vulcanized it in another degree. But you're not wrong. I don't watch it as much as I used to. Just given that I'm here, it's on less, and sometimes I don't need to watch the Habs in Florida in one of those fucking boring ass games in the crawl towards New Year's. But anyway.
Is there any actors you have like a rivalry with, like from Toronto?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a whole there's like, yeah, there's a few. You get to know some of the celeb kind of hockey fans. Leary and I talk a lot of shit to each other. Jerry D and I talk a lot of shit to each other. Fucking when I see what's his face, John Hamm. Although like the Habs and
St. Louis, right?
Yeah, but
John
the Habs
Hamm.
and the St. Louis mean nothing to each other. So that. Yeah, I'm trying to think who else is a big like Leafs fan that I've talked a bunch of shit to. Everybody in my city, everybody that lives here, everyone in my wife's family as well.
Actor, writer, stand-up comedian, director, producer. What one, if you could just do that the rest of your life, would it be?
All I've ever wanted is to write and direct movies. Specifically horror movies and action movies. So all I want to really like, if there was that moment where the genie said, "I'll grant you wishes," all three of mine would be to write and direct movies. They'd all be movies I'd want to write and direct. So that is when I feel the most comfortable. That is when all of the anxiety that I started this podcast talking about, it all goes away for me. Then I can face hundreds of people, then the stakes can be as high as the universe, and I will meet them head on. Then there is no difficulty I can't sustain myself through because I adore it, and it's what I feel that I was like meant to do, right? And so you talk about scoring a penalty at the Forum, for me, it's like watching my being in the audience and seeing a scene that I directed that I think we pulled off and watching and connect with people. No better feeling on earth. And so I would do that as long as they'd let me.
That's awesome. And I hope you get to do that. So you are relaxed every day and you don't have that anxiety. I hope for you in the future that things just keep getting better as far as your business goes.
Jay, honestly, piggyback off that comment there, which is amazing, is to hear you a little, get to personally know you through this podcast alone. I mean, it's inspiring.
Likewise. Thank you.
To hear how you, to acknowledge it and then how you carry yourself, and it's awesome.
Thank you.
It's awesome what you do.
I appreciate you saying
stuff.
that, man. And thank you for having me, boys.
Jay, awesome stuff again. I appreciate your time and consider you a friend, and I
Likewise,
appreciate
Chris.
that. Awesome stuff.